Going to be reading from, and I've titled this The Ultimate Goal of Life. So here we are, and we have this incredible life. It might last, for some of us it might last 100 years, for some of us it might be 80, 70, 60, for some it's 30, for some it's 20, and some don't live beyond maybe even the few days or a few months of life. And none of us ever wants to leave this life when we've got here. We become attached to everything we have. We become attached to everything we do and to everyone we know. And the end result is very messy because we're not prepared for the inevitable. And so it's time for us to really stop and examine what is the point of life? What is the goal of life? Like, we all know about our goals in this world, goals of survival, goals of how to get a job and education and how to develop a business and how to prosper in this life. This we know, right? This we've been educated for. We've gone to school, we've gone to college, we've been told all about how to do this. But what we haven't been told is about the ultimate goal of life and about why we're here and why that matters. Why do we have to die? Why do we have to get old? Why do we have to go through all of this? Is there a point to it all, or is it just pure insanity? So that's what we're going to explore today, and we're going to find out some more. We're going to look at the Vedic perspective. We're going to look at what the Bhagavad Gita has to say about it, and we're going to try to make sense of existence. It's a big topic, and I hope we can cover it as best we can. All right. So the question really is in front of us: what is this life? I remember reading a poem when I was, it was part of my school curriculum in perhaps middle school, 4th grade. I'm not sure, we don't have the same system in India of middle school and so on, so I don't know how that works. But in 4th grade, I remember a poem by, I used to think it was William Wordsworth, but now I'm told it's someone else. So again, it might be. But the point it said was, what is this life if so full of care, and so worries and problems and things like that? We have no time to stop and stare, no time to stand beneath the boughs, the branches, the trees, and stare as long as sheep or cows. So the poet was making the point that what is the point of this life if we have no time to enjoy it, if we have no time to really experience it, to live it? Because we're so caught up in surviving and in being able to make ends meet, as we say, and so caught up in trying to maintain this facade of who we think we are. And it's such a struggle. It's a struggle for all of us. I'm not saying I'm free of that struggle. We're all in this struggle together. And my point to you is, what is it that we're supposed to be doing? And this is the million-dollar question that rarely, if ever, gets addressed. So let's take a look at what the Bhagavad Gita has to say about it, and let's see if it'll help us make any sense. All right? Let's go. So we begin with chapter 8, which is called The Ultimate Goal of Life. And let me just get it set up a little bit, and then we'll get started. It inevitably happens. Okay. All right. So I want each of you to ponder, what is it for you? What is the ultimate goal of life for you? When would you know you've lived a good life? How would you know you've lived a good life? Would it be if you've accumulated a lot of money, if you've made a lot of friends, if you've had a lot of travel? How would you know you've had a good life? What would be, if you were to tell someone the goal of your life, what would it be? And then look at it from the perspective of death. If that is an inevitable thing that is bound to happen to all of us, then from that perspective, when you've died and you've left your body and you're looking back at your life, what would you like to be able to say? Did you live well? What was the point of it all? Right? Everything you did, what was the purpose? And why were you doing what you were doing? What is the ultimate goal? And now, since you're outside your body and you're looking at your life and you realize, oh, this isn't the end of it. The light is calling me back. And again, I shall be back here again. And so again and again and again, I have been coming back. Because now when we're out of the body, we can see things as they are. We understand things as they are. And so the question will inevitably come to you. What does it all mean? Why do I have to keep coming back again and again? And how do I get free of this? So the Bhagavad Gita has a lot of important answers for us. And let's go into it. Arjuna inquires, O Supreme Being, he's asking Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He's asking him some of the fundamentals. What is Brahman? What is the self? What are karmic activities? What is this material manifestation? What are demigods? Please explain this to me. Now, for any of you that haven't got these answers, we'll go give you a little summary today. So, and then he continues, how does God live in this, how does God live in this body, and in which part does he live? And how can those engaged in yoga or devotional service know you at the time of death? Bhagavan Sri Krishna replies, he says, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman. Now, Brahman is at the same time the energy of the universe, and is at the same time also the Supreme Being. So you may say, well, the energy of the universe is a Supreme Being? How is this possible? How can a being be an energy? And Krishna is going to make it very clear that as a being, he is not. He is that being, firstly. And secondly, he is a non-physical being. And that might help you understand that a non-physical being is not subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. A non-physical being can have characteristics different than those of ours. And if that non-physical being is the Supreme Being, the origin of everything, the cause of everything that we see around us, then perhaps that Supreme Being has different qualities and attributes than we do. So Krishna says the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman. So the ultimate, first referring to the divine, the Supreme Being, who is indestructible, who is transcendental, meaning not part of this world, who transcends this human existence, is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called the Self. So if you notice, I've written down there with a capital S, Self. Action pertaining to the development of these material bodies is called karma, or fruitive activity. Means that which is where you are attached to the fruit of your labor, that is fruitive activity, also known as karma. Because whatever you do for the development of this body, there is a karma. For every action you perform that is for this body, there is a reaction, there is some kind of consequence for that. Physical nature is known to be endlessly mutable, so constantly changing. Physical nature is constantly changing. That's why we call this world a relative universe. Everything here is one thing dependent upon another, and all of it is constantly changing. Now, the universe that you see around you is the cosmic form of the Supreme Lord. And I am that Lord, represented as the Paramatma, the Super Soul, dwelling in the heart of every embodied being. Now, keep in mind, if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat. I'm sure there are things that will come up for you, so write them down in the chat and I'll take up your questions as we go along, because it's hard to remember afterwards what your questions were. So write them down, okay? And I'd love to be able to know what it is that you were thinking as I was speaking and reading from here. So let's go over it again. Physical nature is known to be endlessly mutable. So everything in this world is changing. And he says the universe is the cosmic form of the Lord. And I am that Lord, represented as the Paramatma, the super soul, the great soul, living in the heart of every living being. So A, God is in the energy of everything. B, God is in the heart of every living entity. And C, God is a supreme being. Now he says, whoever at the time of death quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Antakale chamam eva. At the end of time, whoever at the time of death quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So let's clarify what this means. Attains my nature. It means that just as God has a spiritual form and a eternal nature, so also, if we remember God at the time of leaving this body, we too have a spiritual nature. We too have a spiritual body. We too become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. The trick, and as you're going to understand as we go along, is to be able to do this, to be able to remember God at the time of leaving this body. The problem is that most of us, when we're leaving this body, we tend to be remembering our loved ones, we tend to be remembering our possessions, we tend to be thinking about the things we did, and we remember all the stuff that we accumulated in our mind is now playing back in front of us. You may have heard how when a person dies, their entire life flashes in front of them. Well, that's what they're remembering. And that's going to determine where they go in their next life. But Krishna is saying here, if you remember me at the time of leaving this body, then you will attain a nature like mine. You will develop a godly form, a godly nature. You will not become God, but you will have a spiritual form, and you will then no longer return to this cycle of birth and death. So let's take a look at that further. And he says this, of this there is no doubt. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajati ante kalevaram. So at the end of life, whatever is your state of consciousness, whatever it is that you have been focused on, your consciousness has been absorbed in, whatever it is that you have immersed your life in, that will determine your state of consciousness. And your state of consciousness will determine where you go at the end of this life. Have you been in the state of consciousness where you were God conscious? If you were, then that will determine where you go. If your consciousness was that of someone who was just trying to survive, to eat, to sleep, to have sex, to defend yourself, then that is more animal consciousness, and that is where you will go. So your next birth will be determined as a consequence. Your consciousness is a consequence of every thought and every action and every emotion that you've had in this life. That's your state of consciousness. Right? I'm not talking about consciousness as the soul here. Your state of consciousness, where you're at in your consciousness, is determined by everything you've thought and done and accumulated and believed in this life. So it's very important to be able to monitor our state of consciousness, to be able to watch and observe our mind, our emotions, our desires, and where is this all going, and be able to then bring it in the direction we want it to go, and not just have it go wherever the heck it wants to go. So Krishna continues, therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you can attain me without doubt. So if you remember, he was saying that if you think of God at the time of leaving this body, then you will go to God and you will develop a godly nature. It means you will no longer be attached to or brought back to this physical world. And how does one do that? And that's what he's explaining here. He's saying, Arjun, if you always think of me, that's why he reveals his form, so you can meditate on his form. See, that's the reason for God taking a form. You may say, well, why does God need to have a form? If God is everything, why should God have a form? Why not? Right? If God can do anything, be anything, why not take a form? Why not let that form be the most beautiful form? So that when you view that, you are mesmerized, you are intoxicated, you are captivated, and you are in love with God. How else will love develop? Right? Only when you are able to perceive that. So he says, right now you may have pictures of Krishna, you may have stories, and start with that. And gradually there comes a point when one has darshan, where he reveals himself to you. At that point, one has now developed a real insight. And I have met many people like that who have had that darshan. For me, the darshan has been more auditory, hearing that voice of God. But you may come across him in many ways. All of us have come across God in some way or other. It may have been a moment of peace and tranquility. It may have been a moment where you felt uplifted. It may have been a moment where you felt time stop and you were just this feeling of love all around you. In all of those situations, you were meeting with God. Sometimes as the energy, sometimes in another person, and sometimes hearing that voice within you, feeling the presence within you. So it's not that we don't have that. God is reaching out to us all the time. So he goes on, I'll go back one. Think of me in the form of Krishna, at the same time carry out your... So it doesn't mean you stop doing what you're doing. You do everything that you do in this life. Do everything that that your work and your job and your business. But with your activities dedicated to me. Now, why is that important? Because when you dedicate your activities to God, then you are no longer implicated in karma. And when you are no longer implicated in karma, you are now free to return back to God. So, with your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, right? And how will you do that? How will you fix your mind and intelligence on God? You will do that by reading about God, like you do in the Bhagavad Gita or any other book in the world. I don't care if it's the Bible or it's the Quran or it's the Bhagavad Gita, whatever. Remembering God. Seeing God in everything and everyone you come across. And, more than anything, chanting his name. It is said that in this time that we live in, the age of Kali, this age of quarrel, hypocrisy, and dissension, that the most powerful way in which to be able to remember God is by chanting the names of God. So that could be through kirtan, which is the singing of God's names, or it could be through recitation of the mantra or on beads. So a lot of different ways to do that. But as that name now begins to occupy your mind, you see, whatever you think about constantly is going to get recorded in your brain, is going to now start playing back to you. So the mantra now starts playing back to you, and you find yourself singing the mantra, chanting the mantra, instead of the chattering of your head or of your mind and all the random thoughts that it was having. That's the power of the mantra. It's exciting, yes. To know that, yes, you can actually replace all that chatter with something divine and now no longer be affected by the stuff of the world. One who meditates on the Supreme Being, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, O Arjun, is sure to reach me. One should meditate upon the Supreme Being as... Now, these are some of the qualities. As he who knows everything. So God is one who knows everything, who is the oldest, who is the controller. So you notice how everything is controlled by God. I'm trying to control the world, but I cannot. God is controlling everything. The sun, the moon, the stars, the waves, the seasons. I am not in control. I am not in control even of this body. I'm not in control of anything. It's the more I realize that, and I can begin to meditate on how God is in fact controlling everything. Right? He has his energies, he has his ways, but not that he's personally there like a puppeteer on a holding a puppet string. No, he's got his energies. It's all delegated out, and it's not necessary that God is personally doing all of this stuff. So yes, meditating on God as the oldest, as the controller, as smaller than the smallest. So therefore, even in the smallest thing you see, a rock, a pebble, a tiny wildflower, to be able to see God, who is smaller than the smallest, in an atom, in an ant, in the smallest of creatures, in insects, who is the maintainer of everything. As you meditate on how this world is so imperfectly moving and so incredibly organized, you begin to see God everywhere. God, you will begin to see, is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun, and being transcendental is beyond the material nature. So one word comes to my mind, and that word is awe. Just being in awe of all that you see. Being in fascination, in a sense of wonder at all of nature, at all of creation, at all that is around you, and of this body, and of all the other people you come across, and the variety of people, and the variety of ideas, and the variety of different. I mean, look at it. Each and every single person is unique. Unique in the way they look, unique in down to their fingerprints, down to their DNA, unique. Every single one of us, a work of art. That's a meditation. That's such an incredible meditation. Then all the species that are there, all the different kinds of creatures, there's a meditation there. Who put all this together? Being in awe, being in fascination about all of this. Be in wonder. There is so much beauty around us. Instead, we are in our thoughts, thinking. Thinking is our enemy. Thinking is the worst thing. It is a low vibration place in which to exist. Thinking is something you want to ban from your life, unless you need it. When you need it, sure. It's like your phone. When you need it, you need it. But you don't want to be looking at that phone all the time. When you sit with your friends, some people look at their phone while they're sitting with their friends. It's rude. In the same way, you don't want to be in your head for most of your life, for most of the time. Only when needed. Then it's on a need, that just at that time is when you use it. It's like your computer or your phone, anything like that. But this addiction to thinking, this addiction to being able to rationalize and figure everything out is something that has been programmed into us ever since we were kids. We were put into schools, and in these schools they emphasize knowledge and learning and thinking. And now we've become thinking robots. We don't realize that there is life beyond thinking. Right? Okay. So, one who at the time of death fixes his life hair between the eyebrows and in full devotion engages himself in remembering God will certainly attain to God. So it's really bringing your attention here to what is referred to as the third eye, or onto your breath, and just really going into a trance, going into a state of deep remembrance, deep connection with God. Practice this even now. Don't wait till the time of death. Persons learned in the Vedas who utter Omkar, and who are great sages in the renounced order Sannyas, enter into Brahman, desiring such perfection, or one practices celibacy. I shall now explain to you this process by which one may attain liberation. Now, Krishna is going to be talking a bit about the yogic process. Gradually, he's going to introduce the process of loving devotion, and how that is the fastest, most rapid way in which to get to God. But there is another process, the process of yogic meditation. And so he's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about what the yogis do and how they leave their body, and how one who is devoted to God leaves their body. So it's a deep thing, it's a profound thing to understand how to end our life. because everything that we're doing now must culminate in that. That is the crescendo. That is the final, peak of our existence. A peak of our existence is not our youth. The peak of our existence is not the achievements that we had, or the time you were in the prime of your life, as they say, right? You're in your 20s or your 30s, and they say you're in the prime of your life. That is not the prime of your life. The prime of your life is the point of death. And it is in that moment that you are either going to be meditating on God or not. I remember at the time my father was passing, he was in a coma and was not able to be meditating. But what we did was we surrounded him, all of us, the whole family, and we chanted and sang and prayed and surrounded him with the energy of God, with that intention, with that blessing that he may return to God, or at least in some way be elevated to a point where coming back, that remembrance of God would remain with him always. So yes, either we must cultivate it so we ourselves are conscious, but if we are not, we must surround ourselves with people who will remind us of God as we are leaving this body. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of God and quits his body, he will certainly reach the supreme destination. For one who remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O Arjun, because of his constant engagement in yoga. Now, Krishna is talking about the yogic process of focusing on one's breath, of chanting Om, but he says there is an easier way. If you remember me as a person in this form, with this name, with this lila, these pastimes, for such a person who has become attached to me, I am easy to obtain because of his constant engagement in yoga. Because actually the heartfelt attachment, the heartfelt devotion is extremely powerful. And one who has given their heart to God, just as you give your heart to a beloved, one who has given their heart to God, then God pulls you back. You are not left here to struggle and suffer on your own. Though there might be some challenges while you are still here, but at the point of death, you are brought quickly back to God. That's the beauty of this path. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. So it's really important to understand when Krishna is saying this, he refers to this world here as Dukkhalayam. It is a land of Dukkha. Dukkha means misery. Ashashvatam, which means a place that is temporary. Mam upetya punarjanma, that having come to me, one does not take birth, punarjanma, in this place which is Dukkhalayam, the land of misery, and which is temporary. Such a Mahatma, such a great soul, samsiddhim paramam gata, has then attained to the ultimate destination, the param gati, the highest perfection, the highest destination. We did not come here to live here forever. We did not come here to make this our home. We did not come here to be able to become attached to a house, a car, a partner, land, or even this body. Because the more we are attached to these things, the more we suffer. If you're attached to your body, then you suffer because your body gets old. If you're attached to this body, you suffer because this body gets sick. Because ultimately you leave it behind, so you suffer. You're attached to your home, if there's a problem, the plumbing has a problem, or something else has a problem, and now it's a cause of problems for you. To maintain this life, everything in this world decays. Everything decays. Everything goes. You leave your house and you go away for a month and it's full of dust and dirt and everything. You notice the decay is starting to set in. And if you leave it for a few months or a year, even more so. And the same with this body, and the same with your garden or your yard, wherever you've been cultivating. Everything decays until you work at it, until you keep it going. So the nature of life in this world is entropy, is going towards a place of destruction and chaos. It is only life, when life energy is brought to that, when we clean up that house, clean up this body, feed it, clothe it, when life energy is brought into it, that is the soul's energy, then that makes this house beautiful, it makes this body look good. But it is the life energy that is doing all that. It is that very life energy that we neglect and do not spend enough time nurturing and cultivating. As we cultivate it, we can also begin at the same time to cultivate our relationship with God. And the more you get to know God, the easier it becomes to be able to become free from your mind, because your mind is now immersed in God, in thinking of Him, in chanting His name, in singing and remembering. Shravanam is listening. Kirtanam is speaking or singing. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, remembering Vishnu, remembering Krishna. Archanam, worshipping. Vandanam, glorifying. Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, serving. Sakhyam, becoming a friend of God. And then finally, Atma Nivedanam, giving one's very heart and oneself to God. That is the place of Atma Nivedanam, surrendering one's whole being, one's whole self, and saying, God, use me, allow me to be of your service and of that of all your people. God, make me your own. Give me, my life has no value. I have no value other than to be yours. You are mine and I am yours. And allow me to be able to serve you in whichever way you need me to. That actually is surrender. That is the place of loving devotion. We do it with our partner. We do it with someone who we love deeply. We all do it. Right? So, why not with God? That is the ultimate love affair. So Krishna says, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. After attaining me, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O Arjun, never takes birth again. So let's go over this carefully. The Vedas talk about higher planets and lower planets. So many of you have been fascinated by the idea of aliens. And the Vedas talk about alien life forms all the time, except that they're not these green characters, Martians with weird horns, nor are they these really demonic-looking characters that are sometimes portrayed in science fiction movies. But rather they are extremely beautiful, far more than the human being, who have longer lifespans, who live incredibly pleasure-filled lives. Right? So he says, even if you're one of the demigods, or if you're in one of the higher planetary systems, the Earth is considered the middle planetary system, equal amount of suffering and equal amount of pleasure. There you have high levels of pleasure, and then there are planets that are below, where there is greater levels of suffering. Even on this earth we have countries and continents like that. In some places there is a greater level of pleasure and less suffering. In other places there is more suffering. In certain countries and continents there is more suffering, more extreme situations, more people in poverty, more people starving. Right? So even here we have that division. And so you begin to understand what Krishna is talking about. Whether you go to the highest planet or the lowest of all planet, all of them are places of misery. So here's the other illusion. Let's talk about just in terms of this world. People think that, if I lived in another country, let's say if you lived in Africa or India or some other place, and say, if I came to America, I would finally be happy. My kids would be happy. Everything would be good. But it's a lie. It's not true. People are not happy here, right? Then if you live here, you think, if I was rich, if I had everything my heart desires, if I was a successful person, then I would be happy. And that's a lie too. Because you meet these people, and I meet them all the time, they're not happy. They're not happy at all. They've got everything. They've got multi-million-dollar homes that they're living in. Some of them have young and beautiful bodies. They have everything they desire. But they are not happy. They are not happy at all. Because think about this. The person who has nothing thinks that if they had something, then their problems would be solved and they would be happy. And to some degree that is true. If you don't have food and you get food, yes, sure. But beyond a certain level where you have a house and you have the basics of life met, beyond that, there is no greater happiness. There is no further thing that will make you more happy. Having more never made you more happy. No, it doesn't work like that. And now the problem is the person who has more has nowhere else to look. They cannot delude themselves. They cannot fool themselves into thinking that if I had more, I would be more happy, because they have more. And they are not more happy. And now they've reached the end of the road. And it's a sad travesty. There is nowhere else to go. This world taught them that if you reach the pinnacle of success, you would be happy. You would be fulfilled. You would have peace. You would be content. But they're not. This is the secret one must learn. And therefore one must find what is indeed the greatest form of happiness. And that happiness cannot be found through any of the things of this world. None of it. It was hidden inside you all along. It was right here. God was right here. Your soul was right here. Everything you needed was right here. And all you needed to do was to go within and learn about that, discover that for yourself. So Krishna is saying here, one who attains my abode, O Arjun, never takes birth again. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together is the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. Now Brahma is known, see, God does not create the world himself according to the Vedas. It is delegated. There are millions of universes, and each universe has a Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma is given the task of creation. And so this is a little insight into Brahma's life. It's very complex, so bear with me. You don't have to remember any of these details. But just because it was going to come up, I thought I'd write it down. So here it is in great detail. A day of Brahma is called a kalpa. And a kalpa is 100 cycles of 4 yugas. Now what is a yuga? A yuga, there are 4 yugas that are talked about in the Vedas. The Satya Yoga, or the Golden Age, lasts 1,728,000 years. This golden age is a time where virtue, wisdom, and dharma prevail. This is the time where that is. So even the Bible talks about it, that at the end of this time will come a time when there will be this kind of a golden age. Well, the Vedas bring it down to exact numbers. It also talks about how there's no vice during that time. Then, after that period ends, comes the Treta Yuga, which lasts 1,296,000 years. There is a decline during that time in virtue and in dharma. And the same thing happens in the next stage, Dwapar Yuga, which lasts 864,000 years. And again, further decline in virtue, in dharma, and an increase in vice. And then we come to the present time we live in, called Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. And now there is an abundance of conflict, of stress, of vice, and adharma, or irreligion. 5,000 years of that have passed since Krishna left the planet. And the total of all of these 4 yugas would be 4,432,000 years. Now multiply that 1,000 and you have 1 day of Brahma. And 1 night of Brahma is equal to 1 day of Brahma. And Brahma lives 100 years, consisting of a day and a night each. That totals out to 311 trillion 40 billion Earth years. So that's 100 years of Brahma. At the end of which there is the destruction of the entire universe. The entire thing is wiped out, it's pralaya, and then it starts all over again. And this way this has been going on again and again and again for billions and billions, well, trillions and trillions and trillions of years, right? So, given this kind of understanding, we begin to see that we are locked into something that has really been going on. And many of us have been here for a good portion of that time. When you start to understand that, you say, oof, what to do about this? So Krishna continues here in the Gita, and he says, when Brahma's day is manifest, this multitude of living entities, so all of us beings, when his day is manifest, all these living entities come into being. Just as when we see the day, right? All the living entities wake up, the birds, the insects, all creatures wake up. So when Brahma's day is manifest, this multitude of living entities comes into being, and at the arrival of Brahma's night, they are all annihilated. Again and again, the day comes and this host of beings is active, and again the night falls and they are helplessly dissolved. Yet there is another nature which is eternal and transcendental to this manifest and unmanifest matter. That other nature, that eternal nature, is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. Please hear this very carefully. Yet there is another nature. So there is the material nature, and he's now talking about a spiritual nature, which is eternal and transcendental to this manifest and unmanifest matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. That supreme abode is called unmanifest and infallible, and it is the supreme destination. When one goes there, he never comes back. That is my supreme abode. Let's read that again. Avyaktakshara iti yuktastam ahu paramam gatim. He refers to as paramam gatim, the ultimate destination. That supreme abode is called unmanifest, avyakta, and infallible. Means it is not subject to any kind of imperfection. It is perfect in every way. It is infallible. It is the supreme destination, and when one goes there, he never comes back. That is my supreme abode. So then you may ask, well, what's it like out there? Is it about some angels playing harps and that kind of thing? Says no, the Vedas don't describe it like that. They speak of two things. Either one goes and merges into the light, and many yogis, they like that. They want to just be done with existence. They want to merge into existence. They want to become one with existence. And then there are others who want to be with God, who have developed a love affair with God, who have fallen in love with God, and who want to spend the rest of eternity being with God. So what do? Wonderful things. They play, they sing, they dance, they have wonderful activities. And it's not all about being pure and perfect and being nice and sweet, but it's just being real. It's not about some fantasy. This is the eternal reality. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading, and everything is situated within him. O Arjuna, I shall now explain to you the different times at which passing away from this world one does or does not come back. Now this is for the yogis. He's describing the yogic process, and for the yogis they have to be very specific about that. I will not go into much detail here, but I'm going to tell you a shortcut. But we'll read this first. Those who know the Supreme Brahman pass away from the world during the influence of the fiery god in the light and auspicious moment during the fortnight of the moon and the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the moonless fortnight, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south or reaches the moon planet, again comes back. According to the Vedas, there are two ways of passing from the world, one in the light and one in the darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back, and when one passes in darkness, he returns. This is a key point to consider. To leave this world in light means to be in a state of remembrance of God, to be in a state of light. Then one does not come back. And if you pass this world being in a state of darkness, as in a state of attachment to all the stuff of the world, or in a state of being wrapped up in not wanting to leave this body, then yes, you come back. The yogis who know these two paths, O Arjuna, are never bewildered, therefore be always fixed in yoga. A person who accepts the yogic path is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing severe austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical karmic activities. At the end, he returns to the supreme abode. And so, in conclusion, one would say, always be a yogi. The ultimate yoga of all, as Krishna describes in the Gita, is the yoga of devotion, the yoga of love of God. In that yogic process of love of God, one develops an attachment to God. And that attachment then carries you back to God. That is why love is the most powerful force, because there is nothing more sublime than love. We've all been looking for love. We've looked for love. We've looked to find the perfect love affair. We've looked to find the perfect partner. And that perfect partner is God. God is our ultimate lover. God is the greatest lover of all. And everything we've ever wanted in love was our soul yearning for that ultimate love. We've been looking for soulmates. We've been looking for someone who is going to be the one. The one is God. The one who will never leave us. The one who will never betray us. The one who will never let us down is God. The one we've been dreaming of is God. Let us begin that love affair now. And let us begin that journey back to home, back to God. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, if there's something you'd like to inquire about, I hope you've been writing. I wasn't checking up till now, so let me go back in and see what questions you might have written down. Okay. Any questions that you'd like to ask? You wanna just put on your video if you've got a question you want to ask, and then come on in. Unmute yourself. And I'd love to. I have a poem. Yes, Vibha Rana points out how the poem that I was quoting was not by Wordsworth, it was by William Henry Davies. Thank you for pointing that out, Vibha. I have understood that was somehow, perhaps in our books back in school, it was kind of miswritten, or I remembered it wrong. I don't know which one, but William Henry Davies, what is this life if so full of care? We have no time to stop and stare. Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, so any questions, any comments, any observations, anything you'd like to know further? I'm sure there's been something or other that you've been thinking about.
Hi, Rocky.
Hi.
I'm still new to this text,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm like, it's hard to keep up with you because I want to read all the in-between stuff.
Okay, there's a lot in between. You're welcome to get a copy for yourself and read it.
Yeah, no, I have the copy.
Okay.
But yeah, I was gonna say, you were talking about the destructive part of God, and that's the part I was questioning as, is that really God? Like, does God really destroy everything at some point, or do we destroy things?
According to the Vedas, God both creates and annihilates everything. And I don't mean there is the little destruction we do. No doubt, you're absolutely right about that. There is the ways in which we mess up, but we're not talking about messing up and destroying things in that sense. We're talking about an entire annihilation of the entire manifest universe, completely like wiped out and then recreated all over again. So that's, I have no way to know or test that. I have no way I can prove or disprove that. These are what the great sages who have meditated and who have written about that. And here is Krishna himself, the divine present in this world 5,000 years ago, speaking about being both the creator and the one who annihilates the entire creation. And he says this happens again and again and again. If you look at those 4 yugas, the 4, every day of Brahma, that is, I think we totaled it out to, I don't remember. Yeah, 4,430,000 times 1,000 years of our earthly life. The entire creation is again wiped out and then recreated all over again. And then once again we begin with all these different species, but maybe different species at different times. Because there are different devas or demigods, alien beings, whose job it is to keep coming up with different species. So they'll keep on coming up with different species at different times and different creations, sometimes repeating the same, sometimes having different ones. I don't have a whole lot of information on that.
That's okay. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Mariah, I think I noticed you wanting to say something. Okay, maybe not.
Sorry. No, sorry. I had my phone in my pocket. I just love the idea that that romantic love or love of family or, that yearning is actually a yearning for God, and to recognize that is such a doorway to the return.
Yes.
So I found this really inspirational, and I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you.